Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to turn, well, frankly, complex regulatory stuff into something you can actually use, some clear strategic insights. And today, we're taking on a big one. The journey of getting a new medicine approved here in India. It's, notoriously complex, very regulated. We're talking about a process that can stretch out anywhere from, 2 to 5 years. Our aim is to give you a kind of roadmap through this high-stakes territory. Welcome to D2Reg Knowledge Capsule.
Exactly. And that roadmap, it really starts with knowing who's in charge. That's the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO. They operate under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. But, while CDSCO does a lot of the, let's say, the groundwork, the final decision, the ultimate green light, that comes from the Drugs Controller General in India, the DCGI.
Okay, so CDSCO and DCGI, the main players. But what about the rule book they're playing by? I mean, this is a huge industry. The legal framework must be pretty solid, right?
Oh, absolutely ironclad. It's essentially built on two layers. You've got the old foundation, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940, and its rules from 45, still relevant, mind you. But then, layered on top, is the more modern, really crucial framework, the new Drugs and Clinical Trials rules, the NDCTR from 2019. And the whole point of this structure is to ensure every new drug is safe, effective, and meets quality standards. No compromises there.
Right. So let's jump right in. Step one, where does this journey begin? If a company wants to hit that faster, 2-year timeline instead of languishing for 5 years, where does that initial success come from?
It all starts with meticulous preparation of the application dossier. The absolute cornerstone is getting it into the standard common technical document format, the CTD format. And that's not just for looks. It aligns India with global standards, makes review smoother, whether it's a full new drug application, an NDA, or say an abbreviated NDA for a generic.
Okay, CTD format. And this prep phase, this is where they have to pull together everything into that big application, right? Form 44. What kind of stuff are we talking about here, just briefly?
Yeah, Form 44 is comprehensive. It needs the whole scientific story. So detailed chemistry, manufacturing, and control data, that's the CMC, proving quality and consistency. You need all the results from preclinical studies, the animal testing, showing pharmacology, toxicity, plus you need to show its regulatory status overseas in other countries, and crucially, either a solid clinical trial protocol or justification for a waiver.
Hold on a second. Waiver. How can you get a waiver for clinical trials if it's a new drug in India?
Good question. It's not common, but it is possible sometimes. Say, if the drug's been extensively studied and approved in major markets like the US or Europe, CDSCO might accept that foreign data, but if it's truly first in class or if CDSCO feels the foreign data isn't quite right for the Indian population, then yeah, a full local clinical trial plan is usually mandatory.
Okay, got it. So they built this massive, hopefully perfect dossier. It's ready. Now what? Let's unpack where it goes next and, how it gets looked at from prep to scrutiny.
Right. So step 2, the review process. It first hits the screening desk at CDSCO. They just check for completeness, are all the boxes ticked, signatures there, basic stuff. Once it passes that initial check, it moves over to the Subject Expert Committee, the SEC. They do the heavy lifting, the deep technical review of the quality, the safety, the efficacy data in that CTD.
And this isn't just reading papers, right? They actually start verifying things at this point.
Exactly. A really critical part here is the inspections. They'll send inspectors out to the manufacturing sites. They need to see proof of compliance with good manufacturing practices, GMP. If the site fails GMP, the whole application can grind to a halt no matter how good the drug looks on paper.
Oof, okay. GMP checks passed. That brings us to actually getting permission to start the human trials. Step 3. How does that application happen now? Is it still mountains of paper?
No, thankfully. It's all digital now. Mandatory submission through the SUGAM portal. That's CDSCO's online platform. Specifically for clinical trial permission, companies use Form CT04. And another key thing, the trial itself has to be registered publicly with the Indian Clinical Trials Registry, the CTRI. That's for transparency, has to be done before they recruit patient 1.
Makes sense. So permission granted, registry done. Now the real core of it. Step 4, actually doing the clinical trials. Phase 1, 2, 3. This seems like where most of that 2 to 5 year timeline gets spent, right? Often 1 to 3 years.
Definitely. This phase eats up the most time and resources, and the focus here shifts to, execution and ethics. Trials absolutely must follow good clinical practices, GCP, and the ICMR ethical guidelines. Those are the rule books, but honestly, a major hurdle, often overlooked, is the Institutional Ethics Committee, the IEC.
Yeah.
Every single hospital or clinic running the trial needs its own IEC approval, continuous approval. Without that, for every site, the trial can't start or the data won't count.
Wow, okay. Ethics approval is key. And you mentioned Schedule Y earlier in relation to data collection. What does Schedule Y actually dictate during the trial? Is it about the data quality itself?
Yeah, Schedule Y of the old drugs and cosmetics rules, it lays out the requirements for clinical trials in India. Things like standard protocols, what data needs collecting, how Indian data should compare to global data, especially if it's a drug new to India. It really underpins the scientific rigor needed. And part of that rigor means if any serious adverse events pop up during the trial, they have to be reported immediately, straight to CDSCO, no delays.
Right. So they've navigated potentially years of trials, kept the ethics committees happy, collected all the data according to Schedule Y. Now they're finally at step 5, submitting for market authorization, the big one.
This is it, the finish line, sort of. They compile all the final data, including the detailed clinical study reports, or CSRs, and again, it goes to the SUGAM portal, still in that required CTD format. The key form here for permission to actually import the drug or manufacture it here is Form CT21.
Okay, Form CD21. Now, I get that the SEC reviews the data, the reports, but the outline mentions something about the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission labs, the IPC labs. Why are they involved at this stage?
Ah, yes, that's a good point. It's another layer of quality assurance. The SEC looks at the science, the paperwork, the IPC labs. They might actually test the physical drug product. They can request samples to check if the quality, the composition, the purity, all that matches exactly what the company claimed in their CMC data. It's like a final, real-world check on the product itself.
I see, a hands-on quality check. So assuming the IPC labs are happy, the SEC review is positive, the DCGI gives the final nod, but then the licensing seems a bit fragmented, different forms, state involvement. Can you simplify that?
It does seem complicated, but there's a logic. The DCGI grants the overall market authorization. What happens next depends on the company's plan. If they're importing the finished drug, they get an import license, which is Form 10. If they plan to manufacture it in India, the DCGI grants a central manufacturing license, that's Form 46. But the license to actually operate the physical factory, that comes from the state licensing authority. That's the physical manufacturing license, usually Form 25 or 28. So ultimately, the drug goes to market under the authorization granted, which is documented in either Form CT23 or that Form 46.
Okay, that clarifies the central versus state role. So after maybe 5 long years, countless reports, inspections, the certificate, the license, time to finally relax and focus on sales.
Not quite, and that's a really important point. Getting the approval isn't the end of the regulatory road, not at all. It actually kicks off a whole new phase. Continuous monitoring, post-marketing surveillance.
Right. Ongoing vigilance. What does that actually involve? What do companies have to do?
They have a legal mandate to keep tracking the drug's safety in the real world. The main thing is submitting periodic safety update reports, or PSURs. And the schedule is demanding. They have to submit these PSURs every 6 months for the first 2 years the drug is on the market. Then it becomes annually for the next 2 years. So that's a solid 4-year reporting commitment right there. Plus, they need to actively report any adverse drug reactions, ADRs, they become aware of to the Pharmacovigilance Program of India, the PVPI.
Well, every 6 months for 2 years, then annually. That's a significant ongoing effort. Okay, so bearing that in mind, let's talk about avoiding delays. If companies want to avoid that 5-year slog, what are the common reasons things get held up? What are the typical pitfalls?
The delays almost always stem from, well, cutting corners earlier or missing details. The most common culprits we see are incomplete dossiers just submitted poorly, clinical trial sites that fail GCP compliance during inspections, that's a big one, missing follow-up data on those adverse events that were reported during trials, or, like we discussed, problems with the Institutional Ethics Committee, maybe it wasn't registered properly or its approval lapsed. These might seem basic, but they are the major time sinks.
So attention to detail throughout is key. But is the CDSCO system totally rigid? Are there any faster routes, maybe for really critical medicines?
Oh, yes, there's definitely some flexibility built in, especially for public health needs. CDSCO does have provisions for fast-track approval. This is usually for drugs targeting rare diseases or conditions considered of national importance where there's an urgent need. They also have specific guidelines for tricky things like fixed-dose combinations, FDCs, combining multiple drugs in one pill. And like we touched on earlier, that possibility of accepting foreign clinical data under certain conditions, that can also seriously speed things up for drugs already approved elsewhere.
Okay, good to know there are some accelerated options. So pulling it all together, let's quickly recap those timelines. How does that typical 2 to 5 year span break down generally?
Well, the science takes time. The preclinical animal studies usually take about 6 to 12 months. The clinical trials, phases 1 and 3 in humans, that's the big chunk, typically 1 to 3 years, sometimes longer. Then the final regulatory review by CDSCO and the SEC. If the dossier is perfect and there are no major questions, that ideally takes around 6 to 12 months. So you can see how hitting that lower end, closer to 2 years, really depends on seamless execution, especially in the clinical and submission phases. Good planning can shave months off that final review.
Right. So wrapping this up, what's the key message for someone navigating this? It sounds like India's system, while complex, is very clearly defined by the NDCTR 2019 rules and that crucial CTD format. Success isn't about finding loopholes, is it?
Not at all. Success is about meticulous, strategic planning and rigorous, continuous adherence to the standards. Understanding the NDCTR 2019 and the CTD requirements inside out is absolutely fundamental.
It's about doing it right, consistently, from start to finish and beyond.
Exactly, and that beyond part is critical. That commitment to quality and safety doesn't end when you get the license. It carries on for years.
Which brings us perfectly to our final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We talked about fast-track approvals being possible, but think about this. Given that absolute need for ongoing GMP compliance in manufacturing and that intensive PSUR reporting schedule every 6 months for 2 years, what are the real long-term cost implications? Does choosing a fast-track pathway, which might get you to market quicker, actually increase your financial and compliance burden significantly in those first few years compared to a standard timeline?
It's a really interesting trade-off to consider. Faster approval means you need operational perfection, especially around safety monitoring and manufacturing quality almost from day one. There's less time to gradually ramp up those post-market systems. That ongoing commitment, that 4-year surveillance period and beyond, is the true test of a company's long-term dedication to the Indian market, regardless of how quickly they got the initial nod.
Something definitely worth considering. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into India's drug approval landscape. We hope this gives you the strategic edge you need. Keep exploring.